welcome back to another side mission, a side crisis. Saturnmania rolls on. I'm playing some of my absolute favorite games on my favorite systems. I've been on a Sega Saturn kick, thanks, of course, to the Saru and the accessibility that the Saru brings to the table. So in previous editions, we've done Fighters Mega Mix, we've done Radiant Silvergun, we did X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Today, we're gonna break the mold. This isn't a Japanese game. This is a US game. This is a game that I adore. And I also don't think it gets a lot of love. And maybe we can talk a little bit as to why. But I'm gonna be playing Astal, which did come out in America. I believe it was a Sega Saturn launch window title. Not a full-on launch title. And we can maybe now's a good time to talk a little bit about the Sega Saturn launch in America before we get into some gameplay with Astal. The Sega Saturn launch in America was infamously bad, like real bad and stupid. It goes back to a legendary E3 moment where Sega does this press conference and they show off the Saturn, they show off some of the games, they talk about how Virtua Fighter, which was at the time was a huge deal, one of the biggest games in the arcade, dare I say in the world at the time, especially from like a technical this is the future of video games kind of a deal. So they talk about that. It's coming with every Sega Saturn. They talk about the price, which is $399 US back in 1995 money, which adjusted for inflation, I don't know. Maybe that's like $800, $900. You tell me. You have access to a calculator or inflation calculator rather. Anyway, like the point is $399 today is a lot of money. $399 back in 1995 is a silly amount of money. But most infamously of all at this E3, well, there's two really infamous moments. On the Sega side, they show off the Saturn and then they say, and it's available right now. And it right there angered so many retailers because the only people that had Sega Saturns to sell was, I believe, KB Toys and Toys R Us. So that you're leaving out Walmart, you're leaving out Target, you're leaving out all these, back when Sears was still in business, all these different places that sold that stuff. And they were left completely in the cold and it angered them greatly. They were all done with Sega at that point. And they had to do a little bit of rebuilding on the Dreamcast, which they would do if not for a fleeting moment in time. Now, the other big thing that kind of doomed the Saturn in the United States from the start, of course, was the Sony PlayStation. So in my opinion, the real fatal death blow came from Sony, the CEO at the time of Sony Computer Entertainment. I think it was the CEO. Can't remember the gentleman's name, but you can watch this moment on YouTube. It's like one of the most famous E3 moments of all time, and it happened in one of the really early E3s. But so Sega does their whole spiel. They talk about how great the Saturn is. Virtua Fighter is coming with it. It's going to cost $399 and it's available right now. Mr. Sony walks up on the stage. He sets down some papers and he just says $299 and then walks off the stage. And the place exploded, like major pop, because they just undercut Sega, who had been in the hardware market for years at this point, and had just come off of the Sega Genesis, which at times was outselling Nintendo. And they were, what can you do at that point? And so then that kind of dovetails into gaming habits in that era and how everyone in the United States, and obviously I'm in on this for sure because I remember I lived it. Like 3D gaming was such a fancy, dare I say, exotic thing that you at this point could only do in arcades or on high-end PCs. And even there, it was very like primitive. Virtua Racing, Virtua Fighter, games like Alone in the Dark on PC, like they were very primitive looking 3D games, but they were 3D games, and that's what people really, really wanted. And so here's this game that comes out in the first year of the Saturn's life called Astal, and we'll get into it in a second. It's a gorgeous 2D platforming game, very charming, very Disney-esque, and nobody talked about it because it wasn't Jumping Flash, or it wasn't Tekken, or Battle Arena Toshinden, any of these early 3D games that really captivated the Western audience. So for me, I remember reading about Astal and the reviews in magazines and looking at it, and it just looked incredible to me. But again, I am certainly just as guilty as everyone else of wanting to play 3D games so badly at that time. That's what upgrading into the next generation was all about back then. If you got a PlayStation, N64, Saturn, didn't matter. The reason you did that was because you wanted the next best, coolest thing, the coolest technology, and that was polygons. Just across the board, that's what it was. So a game like Astal didn't get the love that it deserves. People still don't love it all the way, and that's fine. But I think by looking at it, like just as like a really cool, pretty 2D action game, it holds up very, very well today. I'm going to try to limp my way through it using the Psychopad. But it's a hard game as it is, and it's probably going to be even harder with this joystick. So hopefully, maybe we get past the first level, but that's fine. It's the way it's going to be. So let's do this. Let's go to that Saru menu. Let's pop on our sound for that, and I'm going to appear right here in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. We've got Astal queued up. Let's boot that bad boy, and we will sit through a little bit of the intro because it's really, really cool. This is another thing that I remember quite vividly being very jealous of as an N64 guy back then. I got the N64 that first Christmas in 1996. I was 12 years old. It was, at that point in my young life, maybe the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me. And Mario 64 is an amazing video game. Still holds up decently well enough today, although now it's kind of finally showing its age, especially with the camera. But through the entirety of the N64, I would look at my friends who had PlayStation, had Saturn, or even had Windows 95 machines, Windows 98 machines that had CD-ROM games, and this right here is the thing I was most jealous of across the board, is having these long animated cutscenes, fully voice-acted cutscenes. It just wasn't on the Nintendo 64. It didn't exist until Resident Evil 2. There's a port of Resident Evil 2 on the N64, which is an absolute technical marvel. It has all the cutscenes from that game on this cartridge. Now, granted, it's like the biggest N64 cartridge. I think it's 64 megabytes. So in megabits, it's like, it's like a Neo Geo cartridge, basically. It's like, hundreds of megabits. But the fact that they were able to compress all that stuff down into a cartridge was mind-blowing, but it was a little too late. I think Resident Evil 2 came out on the N64 in like 99. By that point, the writing was kind of already on the wall, and the PlayStation had just completely dominated the N64 and the Saturn. The N64 survived that generation just because it's a Nintendo thing, and if you're going to want to play Nintendo games, you got to do it on a Nintendo system. That's obviously still true to this day. But with the GameCube, they started putting in cutscenes, and by that point, I already kind of didn't care. And now most cutscenes, unless it's like a game that I'm really looking forward to and I'm really into the story elements of a game, I'll sit there and watch cutscenes. But if it's just stuff I'm kind of checking out and don't really care much about, I am firebombing the start button to quit. And there's nothing more annoying, and luckily this isn't really the case these days much anymore, but there are games that come out where you can't, let's say you die and you have to sit through another cutscene again. That's torture. That's hell on earth. And most of the time today you can skip past that stuff. I do play a lot of old games still, so like if there are certain games on Dreamcast or PlayStation where you can't skip through cutscenes, and man, is it torture. It sucks so bad. So here you can see really the 2D powerhouse that is the Sega Saturn with this intro. And look at the color depth and just that logo. We'll let this sit here for a little while because it's going to play another cutscene, another animated movie that's more colorful, looks more cartoonesque. So right there you can see the 1995 copyright sign. There's our hero Astal and some of the enemies you'll be bashing throughout the game. Yeah, and that's our Sega splash screen right there. Something I dearly miss. I miss a good Sega splash screen. They were always so unique and cool. So here we go. Yeah, this is, again, in 1996. I remember vividly a friend of mine bought Blast Corps, so early part of 1997. And there are these little scenes in Blast Corps where you would have like a really ugly looking CG character, you know, postage stamp size screen. And they would be like talking about the mission. And we would all kind of convince ourselves that, no, it's there. Yeah, that's CG. That's definitely computer graphics right there, isn't it? It's gotta be. But yeah, it wasn't. But here on Saturn, and of course on PlayStation, this stuff was everywhere in like every game. So it was a major point of jealousy for me. It's a shame that Astal never took off and got popular as a character. Because I really do like the design of him. I could easily have seen Sega making like a Astal OVA or just a standalone thing, animated thing with it. There's the heel, there's the heavy, I forget his name. But yeah, it's just got a really unique style. It's very, very cool. That shitty bird is annoying. There's no two ways about that. And the voice actor who does the bird, actually no, it's the voice actor that does Astal. The way he expresses being annoyed in and of itself is very annoying, but you know, look, this is the early days of CD-ROM, so you weren't hiring big name Hollywood actors or professional voice actors for that matter to get the job done. So it was mainly like they would just get the janitor to read lines. And there's a certain charm to that. There's definitely a certain charm to that. Okay, I believe that's all of that cutscene, so we can go ahead and get started here. So again, I'm going to be playing this game with a joystick. It's not the best way to go. Let's go to options real quick. Let's make sure we... Oops. Controller settings. So A is command B. Yep, that's what we want. And let's go ahead and extend those lives to maximum, which I guess is just 5. Because this game is a little tough. There's been periods in my life where I devoted solid chunks of time into playing this game just because I love how... I fucking love looking at it. I mean, look at this. Like, it looks like a charcoal drawing come to life. I'm going to make it big on my end for maximum enjoyment. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that parallaxing scroll. You got all those different layers. I mean, that stuff to me looks as good today as it did back then. So the main gameplay hook, Astal can grab things and throw them. That's kind of what you do. He doesn't move particularly fast, which may have been one of the reasons people didn't really gravitate towards him as a character, because Sega is Sonic's house and Sonic moves fast. So take a look at this plant in the foreground. First of all, it's in the foreground, so that's neat. But it's also, it appears as out of focus. So there's like a depth of field in the art that I think is really, really, really cool. And not a lot of games do that even today. So that's, you see that scaling? That's the Sega Saturn doing sprite scaling just about as good as anything. Those little red beans give you health. Okay, here's the dumb bird.
If you're here to steal the bird, you have to get by me first.
And I know the volume is a little quiet there, but you've got an example of wonderfully shitty voice acting. Alright, so now we gotta bash these dudes. And then we free our bird friend. So yeah, you can throw enemies into other enemies, which is the way to go if you can. So now we have our bird friend.
Get away from me, you stupid bird. Quit following me.
he's such a dick to that bird, and all the bird wants to do is shower him with love. Okay. So when you jump, you can do this air attack. It's like a downward hammer toss thing, or hammer punch, which is probably the most effective attack in the game. If you haven't noticed this already, all of the enemies have like these gemstone looks to them. It's like a big cornerstone, a touchstone of the game is all these gems. So you've got some ground trolls shooting arrows at us. And the game, the perspective zoomed out. I don't know if you noticed that, but it zoomed out, so now Astal is a little smaller and you have a wider playfield, which is cool. Down at the bottom I have that flashing meter. I will save that for the boss fight, which is coming up. I'm happy we beat the first level in Astal. That makes me very happy. So this is cool, this cavern deal. It plays with lighting in a neat way. Again, the parallaxing scroll is just so... I love that stuff. If you don't know what parallaxing scroll is, it is when you have multiple layers of 2D elements that are moving at different speeds to give the false impression of depth. It is something that kind of separated the quality 2D games from the shitty 2D games going all the way back to 16-bit era. Like I could show you some Super Nintendo games that have no parallaxing scroll, and man, does it not look good. So it's funny how a little detail like that. And so here you've got like hundreds of these sprites on the screen, no slowdown. No slowdown. Sega Saturn, Jack. It's just too bad that no one wanted 2D games back in 1995. All right, we're gonna keep this going here. Yeah, all you can do here is just crouch and let those guys fly over you. These big diamond pigs. Oh, I only have one hit left. Oh, okay. Let me do my bird move. Yes, the bird gave me health. So the one thing that the bird does is that he will go find power-ups for you off screen and bring them to you, which keeps you going. There's also a bomb attack, and you can select. So right now I have the blue gem. There's a little white toggle cursor thing above the blue gem. That's what's currently selected. I'm just gonna run through this real quick. But he'll do like an all-screen attack, like a bomb attack. Ooh, these guys are gonna get too low. Survive! See, even there, do you see like there's foreground bats that they appear a little pixelated because what are you gonna do? But right there, it just looks so cool. It's that illusion of depth, which when it's done well, looks so impressive. I think still today it looks impressive. All right, there we go. We beat the second level of Astal. We are cooking. Because honestly, with this joystick, I was expecting to not even get through the second level. So here is the first boss. And you'll see some really cool 2D tricks here. There's like a revolving thing right there. And all these dickhead bats protect this giant flying Cyclops bat. And so let's use that bomb strike when we can. Oops. Oh boy, I blew it. I did. Oh, we got him. We at least hit him for one there. I did that a little too early. The boss's life is that gem. It just went from blue to yellow. Okay, now I've sent the bird out to give me health. And the bird has done my bidding. So again, the bird is like... Tails was kind of a worthless piece of shit to Sonic, I'll be honest. Didn't do much for him. But the bird in Astal really helps. Really helps the whole thing move right along. Oh, yeah. Okay, here we go. We're nearing death. He's got one more hit. Oh, excuse me. 2 more hits, apparently. And I have full health, so I can just kind of Go nuts. Fearless, even. All right. We got him, neighbor. And we're moving right along. All right, there's the heavy. We'll call him Astal. I don't know his name. Forget his name. Some little more. See, this is a little bit more of a reserved cutscene here. Kind of more of like a PC Engine style, where it's just static screens. And you see some artwork. There might be some talking. Let's skip it. Let's just skip it. See how quick that loading was? So normally that's like a 30-second load, but because of the Saru, it just goes, nope, right into the action. So let's admire this gorgeous level. Look at the water, and you see like the color lighting just kind of flashing around. Okay, you gotta figure, you gotta remember that the Genesis, although it's a great system, can only do 64 colors on screen at one time. The Saturn could do a lot more than that, as you can see. So that, to me, I think when they developed the Saturn, when they were first addressing Sega, or when Sega was first addressing hardware, I think they knew that one of the biggest limitations of the Genesis compared to the Super Nintendo was the amount of on-screen colors was very lacking. They tried to correct that with the 32X, but we all know how that ended up. Not exactly flying off the store shelves, the old 32X. But yeah, to me, when they're at the design board for the Saturn, and the idea was that it was still primarily going to be a 2D system, I think that's probably like maybe area number one, where they were like, yeah, we got to get more colors on the screen. And Astal really showcases that. To me, this looks like a Lisa Frank binder. There's so many colors going on. Sadly, it's lacking the unicorns, but we do have that cool bird. Okay, I only have one hit left, so I'm going to send the bird out to go get me health. Oh, too little, too late. Look at that. And he came back with the health, and I was already dead. I'm so sorry. I let you down, bird. I let myself down. So yeah, Astal is absolutely one of my favorite Sega Saturn games. It is when I go through periods where, you know, like I might be playing a particular old console for like a month or two, you know, and I mix that in with the modern stuff that I'm playing. And I kind of stay in that lane, so to speak. And so the reason why we started this Saturnmania off, because the Saturn is one of my favorite systems. It's definitely in my top 10 systems of all time. Don't know if it's in my top 5. Maybe it is. But anyway, when I get into a mood of wanting to play Sega Saturn, Astal is one of the games that I think of. There's something about it that, you know, brings me a certain level of joy, which is why I keep returning to it after all these years. And I remember now, I think Astal is probably, when you get a complete copy, if you are one of those sickies that is collecting US Saturn games, Astal was cheap for a long time, and it was one of those ones where it's like a good game and it's cheap, which is not often the case when it comes to video game collecting. Now I think a lot of people have been smartened up to Astal thanks to various YouTubers that share the opinion that this is a great game. So now it's a little bit more expensive than it used to be. I remember buying my copy at a Funko Land for like $10. And boy, were those the days. And they are long gone. Saturn now is like one of the more expensive systems that you can collect games for. Which, you know, is what it is. But really kind of across the board, and thanks to COVID really, this hobby has just gotten so ridiculously expensive that I am very grateful for things like the Saru, like EverDrives, because I do enjoy collecting video games. I always have, probably always will, but I've sold like multiple entire collections, and I haven't bought a lot of retro console games in several years now. I'll still buy like a console here and there, although I'm running out of stuff that I've never tried before. CDI is basically it. But I'm not going to be spending a lot of money on one of those because it sucks. But anyway, having original hardware and then a way to play all these games on the original hardware, that's my favorite recipe. That's the way to do it. And I still own a small collection of retro games that are really important to me that I wanted to share with like my son. I probably have like maybe 25 to 30 Super Nintendo games. Same for Genesis. I still have all my PS2, GameCube, all that stuff because I'm just a really big fan of that era. But aside from that, I have sold the majority of my stuff. Okay. Here we go. Yes! Nice dodge. Yeah! I love that weird one-armed creature. Such a neat character design. Dang it. Well, if we go out on this level, it's a fine level to go out on because it looks so good. And it most likely is what we're going to be doing here. We use our enemies as trampolines. That's the only way to do it. Oh, get the health! Got the health. Survive! Just like Taz said, survive if I let you. Here we go. Damn it. Ah, jeez. Okay, well, I think I'll call it here. I think I'm going to call it right there. And I'm going to do this for me. So that's Astal for the Saturn. Absolutely one of my favorite Saturn games. Like I was just saying, when I think of the Saturn, it is a game that pops into my head as something I want to play. And then I will burn myself out on the Saturn, and then it goes back into the closet. But that's just kind of how I do things. Like I pick a console and I kind of fixate on it for a period of time, and then I rotate those things out. But that's going to do it here on this installment of Saturnmania. It rolls on. I'm going to do one more. I'm going to make it a nice 5-pack. I might come back to Saturn down the road and do 5 more, and then I can have these are my top 10 favorite Saturn games. But for now, we're just going to do the 5, and then I don't know. What system am I going to do after that? Maybe I go back to my beloved weirdo Jaguar, the outsider of the group. Maybe I move on to PC Engine. Maybe I do something that more people know about, like the Genesis or the Super Nintendo. Certainly I'll be doing the Dreamcast at some point. But that was Astal. This is the Sega Saturn. Uncle Bob not here, and that's for the best because he would probably be asleep by now. Or checking basketball scores. Either one of the two. This is not for him. This is for Daddy, as I am a fan of this stuff, and he is not. So, all that being said, please like and subscribe. Check us out over on the Spotify if that's your deal. Give us a 5-star review. Comment on these fucking things. Give us suggestions if you want to see us play a certain game or talk about a certain topic. All that stuff's well and good, and we invite it. So, thank you so much for watching, and I will be back with another edition of Saturnmania.